Well, one of the great bands of the 70s are Chicory Tip, and that iconic number one back in 1972, Son of My Father, is still fondly remembered by many people 40 years on. Now, it was the first single to use the Moog synthesizer, and I'm delighted to say that all four members of the band are still very much with us, and two of them are still going out live, namely drummer Brian Shearer and guitarist Rick Foster. Well, as most of you will know, I've been a bit of a Chicory Tip fan for as long as I can remember, Son of My Father being the first record that I bought back in 72. I'm delighted to say that joining me on the phone today from Maidstone in Kent is Rick Foster. Rick, welcome to the programme.
Hello.
Now, 40 years. It's incredible to think that Son of My Father is 40 years old. Does it seem that long?
No, it doesn't. It seems like it was only a few years ago.
If we go back even further, it was you and bass player Barry Major who formed the band called the Sonics, and that was back in 1961, over 50 years ago, when you were both still at school, and that would be infants, wouldn't it?
We were just leaving school. In actual fact, we just left. We started school together on the same day when we was 5 years old, and we left on the same day. We went through school in every class together. Barry took up an apprenticeship and an electronics engineer, and I went into printing. And I hadn't seen him for a few weeks, and one day Barry called round to me and said, "You've got to come to a youth club." He said, "There's a great group playing there, and they play all Cliff and the Shadows numbers." He said, "I'm sure you'll love them," sort of thing, you know. I didn't think too much more about it that day, and then all of a sudden, about 7 o'clock, Barry knocked on my door and said, "Are you ready?" I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, yeah." I said, "Oh, I'll come along then." And we went and saw this group. They was called the Nighthawks, and they was guys of our own age. And I'd never thought before, you know, guys of our own age playing this sort of stuff. You know, we always thought of the Shadows being a few years older than us, and we looked at each other and was absolutely gobsmacked. And from then on, we said that night about forming a group, which was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, and then it all sort of evolved around that youth club where we was allowed to practice on a Saturday afternoon. They let us practice, and we got a group together and called ourselves the Sonics. Mainly because we had Burns Trisonic guitars.
Oh, right. So that's the story behind that.
Yeah.
Now, 6 years, of course, of that band, and in 1967, it was you two with Mick Russell and lead singer Peter Hewson. And I think Barry thought it would be a good idea to change the name to Chicory Tip. And again, no big real story, I suppose, about the name Chicory Tip.
We knew we was looking for a new name, but we didn't. We just wanted to get rid of like the Beatles, the Shadows, the whatever. We just wanted a name which said like middle of the road or something like that, you know, Piggity Witch. In actual fact, I can remember to this day where we was. We was in an army barracks just outside of Maidstone, and we was on with a group called the Manish Boys that night. Believe it or not, David Bowie was one of those people, and we was the support act. And we come off stage there, and we just went to the dressing room door. I don't know where Barry had got this from, and I still don't know to this day. The only thing I can relate to it is maybe Camp Coffee years ago used to be made of, well, they still sell it as far as I know, it used to be made of chicory. And he said, "What about the name Chicory Tip?" I thought, yeah, what a great name, you know.
And a change of name and a change of fortune as well.
Yeah, a few years afterwards, yeah.
So how did you meet Peter Hewson?
He was at school with us, but he was the year above us. It was our rhythm guitarist, actually, in the Sonics. He said, "A mate of mine wants to sing in a band. Any chance we can give him a go," sort of thing. I said, yeah. It was job enough for us in the first place to learn guitar. So I wasn't really interested too much in singing at that point, you know, because we was getting ourselves together instrumentally. In actual fact, we all the guys in Chicory Tip have been to Southborough School in Maidstone. Even the guy what's with us now, Peter Giles, he's our bass player at the moment, and I hope he's going to remain our bass player for quite a long time. He was also in the same class as myself and Barry.
Southborough School in Maidstone in Kent?
Yeah.
My goodness, I hope they've got a plaque on the wall.
I don't think they have, actually, but Yeah, they should have, shouldn't they?
Not too many success stories out of Maidstone, I would have thought.
In actual fact, we're the only band to have ever got in the charts from Maidstone. And to get a number one as well, you know.
Absolutely, and I think a campaign ought to start for that at the very least. Now, Peter, of course, a very distinctive voice, hadn't he? And, of course, you managed to get the elusive contract, the record contract that everybody chases, and you went with CBS Records. CBS, of course, absolutely huge at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So how did it all come about?
A friend of mine, his girlfriend, knew Roger Easterby, and there was a dance at a place called Tudor House in Maidstone, and there was a group on supporting Vanity Fair, who he'd also got at the time, who'd had success. I was there on the actual night, and they wasn't that brilliant. And unbeknownst to me, she said to Roger, "Cool, I don't think much of that group you got on with Vanity Fair, supporting Vanity Fair tonight." And he sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, "Yeah, they're not very good, are they?" You know. She said, "Well, next time you want to support a group, I know of someone." He said, "Oh, who's that?" You know. She said, "Well, Chicory Tip." And he said, "Oh, how do we get in touch with them then?" And she put us in touch with Roger. We played for him a few times at Tudor House, and then all of a sudden, one Sunday evening, he came up and said, "I've got a record here." He said, "I don't know whether you'd be interested in recording it. It's called Monday After Sunday," and that was our first record with Roger.
Now, of course, Mick left the band to get married, and in came Brian Shearer.
He fell in love with this girl in Wales. In actual fact, he come down to me on the Sunday evening and said, I'm going to go to Wales. I've fallen in love with this girl, blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Well, if you've got to go, you've got to go." So he went, and we was playing the very next night in Deal, and we hadn't got a drummer. And my mother said to me, "There's a little guy who's younger than you. He's got there's a drum kit set up in his front room, and I see it when I go up on the bus." She said, "I don't know whether he'd be any good for you, you know." So I went along there in the dinner time and approached his mother, because Brian was at work at the time, and she said, "Oh, no, he's in a band. He wouldn't want to play with you." I said, No, we're not asking him to play with us permanently. I said, "Perhaps he'd help us out tonight, you know." Anyway, he come home and said, "Yeah, I'd love to play with you, you know." So he did a few gigs with us, and then we started putting some money in his hand. What he never sort of seen the lights of before, because he was in a band with I think there was a 6-piece band, and they'd got two guys what were doing lighting and that, and they ended up with literally nothing. And we started putting a few quid in his hand, and next thing you know, he was our permanent drummer.
Fantastic. And of course, the record deal was another selling point for the band as well.
Yes, yeah.
And of course, Monday After Sunday was the first single. Then it was My Girl Sunday. So you had two singles, both with the word Sunday.
Yeah, ironic, that, wasn't it?
Yeah, very unusual.
Yes.
But they didn't really do too much. But then came Excuse Me Baby, which was the third single, and that got you onto Top of the Pops, which must have been a real thrill.
Absolutely, because I think it was Alan Freeman. He absolutely loved the song. He went with it from the beginning. In actual fact, he made a little jingle up and kept playing it. Unfortunately, it still didn't get in the charts, but it got, being as the airplay was that good, it got us the Top of the Pops, which was very, very unusual at the time to get a Top of the Pops if you wasn't in the top 50, I think, and we managed to get the Top of the Pops. But unfortunately, that clip has been wiped by the BBC.
I was going to say, there are very few Chicory Tip clips about, aren't there? There's one for What's Your Name from a German television programme. There's obviously the famous Son of My Father one, which gets repeated a lot. And the promo video of Son of My Father is still in existence. But they're the only three that I've actually uncovered.
Yes, and I think you're going to find there's not much more about either. There's supposed to be a Belgian television company which did a Grief Christina.
Well, it's amazing what does pop up on YouTube these days, so you never know. But of course, there was still no sign of an album there, because back in those days, I suppose, the record companies tended to push a lot of singles out, but very few albums.
Yeah, it was really, you had to do the business with a very, very big single at a time, you know, before they'd even think about doing an album.
And I suppose in these days, you probably get one single, and if it doesn't chart, then you're out. Those days, they did actually give you a bit more time, didn't they? 3 or 4 singles at least.
Yes. I don't know how much more time we would have had if we hadn't have had Son of My Father. But that was our 5th record, and I suppose we was very, very lucky, really, to have gone that far.
Because your 4th single was I Love Onions, and that was effectively not promoted due to the fact that Roger Easterby, of course, discovered this German song, which I think was Michael Home, and English lyrics by Giorgio Moroder, and Giorgio himself had recorded the single, which was, of course, Son of My Father. And then what happened next, of course, was something akin to a James Bond movie. It was very secretive. What went on? Tell us a story.
We'd got I Love Onions out at the time, and no sooner that went out, Roger got hold of this copy of Giorgio Moroder's song, in actual fact, to promote as a single. At the time, you couldn't record a song unless it had been played and logged, because every song which is played by any radio station has to be logged. So Roger went down to some little radio station in, I think it was Bristol, and got this song played. And so once it was played and logged, there it was to be covered by someone. And he phoned me up at work at the time and said, "Get your behind over my house tonight." He said, "I think I've got the one we've been waiting for." And we recorded it. I mean, so I Love Onions, all the promotion just stopped immediately because he wanted to get this out.
Now, of course, Roger's talked openly about it since. I mean, he's made up with Giorgio, obviously, and of course, as a writer, Giorgio and Pete Bellotti penned your next hit as well, which we'll get onto shortly. But because of the secrecy, what happened is you couldn't get hold of the lyrics to the song, so the words to your record was different to the one that Giorgio recorded.
Yes. Well, only slightly, just a few minor changes on it. But if we'd have known at the time, being as we put some different lyrics to it, we could have also put our names on the record and got a cut of the writing, which we didn't know at the time.
In hindsight, it's a wonderful thing.
Yes, and we would have made a fair bit of money out of that, I think.
I think so. Do you know the total of Son of My Father in millions?
What, the sales?
The sales, yeah.
It's got to be well into 3 or 4 million by this time, I would think. I mean, no sooner it was out. I mean, we had a silver record presented to us by Noel Edmonds within about a couple of weeks. It was selling some ridiculous amount per day, so it topped the 250,000 within a couple of weeks,
And of course, there's compilation albums since then. I mean, nearly every 1970s compilation album has Son of My Father on it.
It could even be up to anything like 10 million, but I wouldn't like to say,
But huge numbers anyway. And of course, the Moog synthesizer, that sound was kind of going to define the band over the next couple of years, wasn't it? But none of the band actually played keyboards because it was studio engineer Chris Thomas, I think, that did the solo on that.
No, it wasn't Chris Thomas. He programmed the Moog.
Right. So who actually played it?
Sequences. It was another guy, and I've lost touch of what his name was, actually. He appeared on the Top of the Pops clip with us. Being as it was a one-handed instrument, I played it when we went on tour,
But of course, the interesting thing, and one of the great things about having you on the radio show today, is to kind of dispel a few rumours, because if you look at Wikipedia and many other references, Chris Thomas's name is down as the guy who played the keyboards on the record. And in fact, as you say, he programmed it.
Yeah.
So we've got a bit of a scoop there. So how did you all cope with the success then? Because you'd had the 4 singles out, and then Son of My Father, and it just shot up the charts. It was extraordinary. It went from 30 to 11 to 2, then number 1 for 3 weeks before Nielsen's Without You took you off. But I mean, what a change, and happening so fast. How did you cope?
We did cope, but the pressure, what's on you at the time to do promotion is phenomenal. I mean, God knows what the Beatles must have been like. It must have been frightening. We was doing enough. We was going to country. We couldn't get over to Spain at the time because it was number 1 in Spain, and they wanted a video to show on like their Top of the Pops or whatever the corresponding one was of theirs. So they sent a team over, and we was playing at Southsea one evening, and in the afternoon they got us to set the equipment up on Southsea Promenade, and they shot a video. Whether or not they got permission from Southsea Council, I don't know.
Bit too late to ask now, anyway. But that is the promo video that you can now see on YouTube. I mean, it has survived incredibly well.
That was for Spain, but that one's emerged. So you never know. the other one might emerge sometime. We've got Grief Christina from Belgium.
Now, of course, we mentioned how all this kind of secrecy went on with Roger Easterby and taking Giorgio Moroder's song, etc. But, of course, Giorgio Moroder and Pete Bellotti went on to write all the hits for Chicory Tip and others as well. Yeah. What's Your Name, of course, being the next single. Yeah. So how did that one come into play?
Well, Roger obviously was in touch with Giorgio, and being as Giorgio wasn't a performer, he didn't mind. I don't know quite what went on with Roger and Giorgio, but they obviously made a little pact, and he was quite prepared to write some more songs for us. You know, being as we'd had especially a million seller.
Yeah, made him a lot of money.
Yeah.
And What's Your Name, obviously, was, again, using the synthesizer, and which, of course, became part of the sound. I mean, it really did change the Chicory Tip sound. When you listen to the very early stuff, and then Son of My Father onwards, it really defines Chicory Tip as the sound that it was, and it was so different from anything else that had been recorded.
The Moog synthesizer had been featured on a few recordings, but it had never been used as the lead instrument. That was the defining thing, you know.
Because just to clarify as well, the Del Shannon Runaway, that was a clavio, I believe, wasn't it? Which was a totally different instrument.
Yeah.
Now, I'm really going to test your memory now, Rick, because when What's Your Name came out, it was released and it came quietly into the charts at 39 and 26 and 23 and 21, and everyone thought, I suppose, after 4 weeks that it wasn't going to make the top 20. Then all of a sudden, it jumped 8 places to number 13, and then the week after, it crashed back to number 27. Yeah. Now, I'm wondering how it suddenly shot up from like 21 to 13 and then disappeared the next week. It was very, very unusual chart placings.
I can't honestly remember too much about what happened there. I know the guys were very, very, down in the mouth about it. That it didn't make the top 10. Being as we had a number one. In time, you've got to come back down to earth. We were still doing promotion on Son of My Father in different countries. Coming out in different countries, and the promotion on What's Your Name wasn't as great as it should have been, at the time. And,
of course, you mentioned about number one, getting a number one straight off, effectively, with your first chart single. I mean, there are bands like The Who, for instance, who have never had a number one, and we can see the amount of songs they've had out. So, I mean, it was very, very special. But as you say, some bands are going 20 years and they still don't succeed to get to number one. So to get it on your first chart success was, pretty unusual for a start. And, of course, as you say, chasing up to have another number one is so difficult.
At least it wasn't a one-hit wonder.
Well, that's for sure. But the interesting thing was that the follow-up to What's Your Name was The Future Is Past, which is one of my all-time favourite Chicory Tip songs.
Really?
And that never charted at all.
I think the guys didn't want to keep the Moog the feature on everything, So they tried something different, and it didn't work, unfortunately,
So back came the Moog for Good Grief Christina.
Yeah, well, there you go,
And, of course, it was round about that time that you actually left the band, didn't you?
Yeah, I was quite disappointed with the whole business, really, because the management of the band, the prices we was going out for, it was just ridiculous. I could earn as much doing my normal job and doing a couple of gigs of a weekend. It just wasn't on, And the guys wanted to go in a different direction at the time. They wanted to do something, like Deep Purple or Status Quo was doing at the time. The band, in my opinion, wasn't that sort of band. So it was easier that I left, I'd had a few problems with health as well, so I just wanted to give it a break and get out, and I wanted to go back to normal, really, because the entertainment business is not as people see it, It's not all it's cracked up to be, Was a bit of a low at the time, so I thought it was easier that I left,
We do hear a lot, though, about chart bands who have had loads and loads of hits, and what you're saying is very typical, I think, of a lot of the acts from the 60s and the 70s who I've met and spoken to, and it's a very similar story, that they ask the question, well, where's the money gone and who got the money? And it very rarely seems to get to the right people, i.e. yourselves.
Exactly. I've got some things that I didn't tell you sort of thing, because about money situations, with the band. At the end of the day, it's not the artists who get the lion's share, believe me. It's the writers, management, record company. It just gets swallowed up. The Bay City Rollers were typical. If you go into their history, they was at a similar sort of point at one time,
And of course, bands like Sweet, for instance, I'm thinking, because obviously they used a songwriting team like you had Moroder and Bellotti, they had Chin and Chapman.
Chin and Chapman, yeah.
And what they were trying to do with their B-sides was write their own material as well.
Yeah.
What about songwriting within Chicory Tip? Was this something that you felt you might be able to record your stuff for A-sides later on? Was that always part of the plan, or was it...
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have, I was doing the majority of the writing on the B-sides, not that they were anything particular, but the one which I am quite proud of is Memory.
Oh, great stuff!
That
yeah,
was the B-side of What's Your Name?
Yes,
and yes, but there again, it's getting the time, going around the world doing promotion on things, and getting time to go back and write some songs. I think that was the aim of the band. Yeah, it would have been nice to have gone on and. Especially if you've got an A-side,
Now, Memory, I think, was fantastic. And, of course, it was almost the total opposite to A Son of My Father, which was very catchy, very up-tempo. I mean, Memory was just a beautiful, beautiful ballad. And I suppose the nearest that Chicory Tip came to a ballad was Take Your Time, Caroline, a little bit later on, which we'll come to very shortly.
Yeah.
Obviously, you weren't involved with the band then.
No.
But Memory, at least getting on the B-side, hopefully, I'm hoping that you're going to tell me that you made a little bit of money out of that one.
I didn't make a penny out of it.
Wow, and that was a big B-side. So obviously one or two regrets from that perspective. But you did leave the band. You went for 25 years, I think it was, with Edison Lighthouse, which was obviously, everyone remembers, Love Grows in 1970. So you obviously had an enjoyable time playing with Edison Lighthouse, and you were replaced in Chicory Tip by Rod Clout. But no doubt you had one eye on the progress of Chicory Tip as well, because obviously fond memories of the band.
Oh, yeah. I was happy doing my time with Edison Lighthouse because they was doing the sort of things I thought Chicory Tip should have been. I mean, the guys didn't want to do the cabaret circuit. They was quite adamant that they wanted to do the college circuit. I mean, unless you was doing sort of progressive music, we wasn't that sort of band, dare I say, We just wasn't, we were and we was never going to be that sort of band. So Rob was a sort of heavier guitarist than I ever was, but I don't think he gave the band exactly what they hoped he was going to produce for them, And so, in actual fact, he was. I think he was only with the band a year or 18 months. I might be wrong there. I don't think they could get on the circuit they really wanted to be, because they were still classed as a pop band.
And it's always difficult, isn't it, when you've got four people and not everyone is going in the same direction, effectively.
Yeah, that is why I thought it was easier for me to leave, really,
Now you missed out, obviously, on Good Grief Christina, because that made number 17 in the charts, and that was it as far as the charts were concerned. And I think one of the big problems why that was because the follow-up was Cigarettes, Women and Wine, which Radio Luxembourg, I remember, played to death back in 1973. But, of course, just the title of the song, Cigarettes, Women and Wine, back in 73, was a big no-no for the big radio stations.
Especially the BBC thought it was a bad influence on the youngsters, sort of thing,
Amazing.
If you ever did. I mean, it's Toy Town nowadays, it would be, wouldn't it? But at the time, it was classed as a no-no, for the BBC. And if you didn't get the BBC behind you at the time, although some records were a band, do go to number one. We wasn't that lucky.
And of course it was another Moroder Bellotti, as was the follow-up, which was called IOU. And again, it was the synthesizer which came into play there. And IOU, in fact, I think was probably the song which really started the big fade, effectively, from Chicory Tip, because when that one didn't hit, as well as Cigarettes, Women and Wine, the writing, I guess, was on the wall. You were obviously out of it then. And then there was just really Take Your Time, Caroline, which was much slower, ditching the synthesizer again, but unfortunately, despite airplay, it didn't actually work out. And then the final crack at the charts was one of the best ever Chicory Tip tunes, I must admit, called Survivor, which was on Roger Easterby's new label, which was Root, back in 1975. Not written by Moroder and Bellotti, but very much in the style of.
It was, wasn't it?
And it was somebody, was it Zach Lawrence and John Weston?
I've got to say, that was a terrific record. It should have charted. But Roger's label at the time, Root Records, was very, very young, and sometimes you need time to get a record label established. I think that was maybe why, you know. But to my mind, that should have definitely been a hit. It was a terrific record, yeah.
But sadly, there was no more after that. I mean, that was basically the close of the book because, as far as I know, there were 30 tunes by Chicory Tip back in the 70s that were actually recorded. And yet, there was just the one album, which was Son of My Father, of course. And the amazing thing is that I think I found 5 compilation albums in existence. So you've actually had 5 more compilation albums than you had actual albums themselves. So 1975, Survivor came, brilliant record, flopped again, and that was the end of Chicory Tip. Do you know what actually happened?
I think by that time, Barry had just left, so it was left Peter, really. I think the band for that time, had its day, sort of thing, you know. Even groups like Sweet, Slade, and that, you know, they go for a time, and then you can't go any further with the band at that time. Maybe you can come back with the band at a later period, you know. But sometimes bands just fade away, you know. And I think Chicory Tip had all the success that it was going to get at that time, you know.
Now, Peter Hewson actually did some singing after that as a solo artist, we believe.
Yes, he did, yes. I think he only put one record out, and the name eludes me at the moment. It was with a guy called Vince Clarke, who had Yazoo.
And Erasure, of course.
And Erasure, of course, yeah. Yeah, it was with him, as far as I know. I remember him coming along to a television we did in somewhere in the 80s, somewhere about 83, 84. And I think that's when he put the record out, around that time. And he come along with Vince Clarke to our television recorded, which was for Channel 4, Unforgettable. Do you remember it at all?
Gosh, yes, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. We did. Well, I did it with the first series with Edison Lighthouse, and then the second year I did it with Chicory Tip. We did Good Grief Christina and Son of My Father on the second series.
So there might be video available of that somewhere.
There is. I've got it somewhere, and I will have to look it out.
Peter opened up a bar, really, didn't he? He went into that side of the business.
He opened a nightclub in Charing, 8 to 10 miles from Maidstone. I think it was called the Robin Hood.
And after that, is he still in the trade?
Before he went professional with the band, he was an architect. I think he's gone back into that somewhere now.
So we'll talk a bit more about Peter in a short while, but let's just talk about the other members of the band and what happened towards the end of Chicory Tip. Brian Shearer, for instance, now, he disappeared before the band split up themselves, and he was replaced by John Longley in the latter years. So what did Brian do after that?
I'm not quite sure what he did when he left the band, but he's never given up playing. He went into a little country band. I think it was called the Gary Blackmore Band.
And Barry Major?
Barry came out, and then he went into the pub business. He took a pub in Maidstone, and he was there for quite a few years. He's quite a well-known guy throughout the Maidstone as a nice good landlord he was. And
the other guy, of course, the one who replaced you, Rod Clout. What did he do after Chicory Tip?
He emigrated to Australia, and he's still there. I think he's in Adelaide somewhere.
Well, of course, the fringe people connected with Chicory Tip, the guys like Giorgio Moroder, of course, we all know what happened to him. A very successful career with Donna Summer and the Euro scene. But Roger Easterby, of course, went on to produce bands, and Root Records, of course, he formed there. Whatever happened to Roger, though, in recent years?
He went into horse racing business.
Really?
I don't know whether he's still there or whether he's retired now, but I haven't heard from Roger for quite a few years now, so as far as I know, he's still living in Gravesend area.
Now, there was, of course, a big reunion in 1996 to celebrate your own 50th birthday, and Brian and Barry and you did a show together. Sadly, Peter had throat problems and work commitments, so couldn't do it himself, but presumably he would have done so if he could.
Oh, yes, I'm sure he would have done, yeah. Well, I don't know whether he was suffering with his throat at the time, but that was one of the reasons I'm sure he wasn't there.
So tell me about the actual gig itself. All of a sudden, you're back together again, and let's remember that it's about 21 years since the chart days. So how did it all come about, and how did you organise it?
I didn't organise it. My other half, she organised it, Jane, and it was a complete surprise to me. I thought I was going on a gig. All the other guys in Edison Lighthouse had said we got a gig in a village hall several miles away from Maidstone in Rye. So I went along there that night, went through the doors, and everyone I can think of from my past was there.
Fantastic. So there they were on stage, basically waiting with a space and a guitar for a certain Mr. Rick Foster.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
You had such great fun with it that there was something inside all three of you to say, well, look, we could, the magic's still there. We could actually get back together again, and that's what happened.
In actual fact, myself and Barry were doing a little bit together at the time. We was doing a few duos together in a couple of pubs we know, and people kept coming up to us and saying, "Oh, is the band going to get back together?" Edison Lighthouse at the time were slowing down with bookings, and I thought, well, if we're going to do it at all, let's go for it now. It took a little bit of time getting it off the ground, but within about a year we was up and running, and we've been having it all back since.
And of course, the difference this time round is that it's more of a kind of doing the circuit, the cabaret stuff. It's all about the hits, isn't it? And covers.
If you start getting too adventurous with some of your songs, you can lose a crowd within a song. So we make sure it's all good pop stuff, what we do.
But you were saying that there is an opportunity of maybe putting something like Cigarettes, Women and Wine back in.
We're going to, yeah. Yeah, we're definitely going to put Cigarettes, Women and Wine back in the show, yeah. Was
Peter actually asked to rejoin permanently? Was he involved in that, or was it just really the three of you that...
No. In actual fact, Peter came along to a couple of rehearsals and that, and his voice wasn't too great at the time. So he bowed out, sort of thing, and let us get on with it,
So he's given you the blessing, but it's a shame to hear that the voice went.
Yeah, well, he'd got a throat problem at the time, and he only had to sing a few words, and he started coughing. Whether or not he's got over that now, I don't know.
So it's almost impossible to think that the four of you will ever get back on stage again as a result of that.
As I say, Barry is now down in Portugal, so but he comes over every now and again. Be nice to get the whole lot of us back together for a couple of gigs.
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? I mean, even if Peter went on stage and did a little bit of lip syncing or something, it'd be great to see you all again, wouldn't it? Back on stage. So we wouldn't rule that one out.
Oh no. No, I wouldn't rule anything out, no.
Oh, that's very good news. Now, of course, since the band got together, you decided to record an album in 2000 called Chicory Tip in 2000, which was, a fairly obvious title there. And you did revisit Son of My Father, What's Your Name, and Good Grief Christina. It was quite nice to actually hear the lyrics to Son of My Father the way they probably should have been in the first place.
Yeah, we thought we'd do the proper lyrics to it this time. Yeah.
But you still had the similar sound to Son of My Father in particular with the Moog synthesizer. Was that sampled from the original?
Yes, it was, yeah. Dave Chews, who was part of Edison Lighthouse, he had a recording studio, and he did some sampling for us and got the track together for us, yeah.
And it was very interesting because talking about Brian Shearer, who went with the Gary Blackmore band, the country band, and played some country, there are a couple of country-sounding tracks on that album.
Yes. At the time, there was a country music television. I was so sorry to see it go, when it went, because there were some really good songs coming through. One of them was the Reba McEntire one, which I did, Till You Love Me, and the other one, Then You Can Tell Me Goodbye. That was, it was originally done by a group called the Casinos back in the 60s, but redone country-wise by a guy called Neil McCoy.
It was obviously an album that you thoroughly enjoyed doing.
Oh, it was absolutely wonderful to, getting back and doing it,
Just going back for a couple of moments, Rick, what about memorabilia from the glory days, gold discs and costumes and things like that? Because there were some incredible costumes, weren't there?
Yes.
I always remember the spider on the head.
I wasn't involved in the space outfits.
Yes, that was Good Grief Christina, isn't it?
Yeah,
You'd gone by then. You missed out on that.
I missed out on that one. We've still got the gold discs, and silver and gold discs. Yeah.
How many have you got in the end? Because there'll be different countries as well, presumably.
No, we only got the one.
Oh, right.
No, we only got the one. We with each other gold disc. I only had the one gold disc, I'm afraid, yeah.
Oh, right. I thought there'd be more for different countries and stuff, but...
probably should have been, but they never come our way.
So what memorabilia have you actually got at the moment?
Oh, I've got lots of different, some photos and that, still kicking around, yeah.
The most amazing ones as far as records are concerned, as I say, we've uncovered quite a few strange objects, and one of them, I think, the most strange of them all was in Poland. It was kind of like a 3 or 4 inches by 8 inches piece of flexible orange plastic with Good Grief Christina on, along with Tweedledee by little Jimmy Osmond. Now, that doesn't come any more rare than that.
No, amazing. And yeah, I've seen a couple of these things on the internet. I don't think they play very well today.
No, I don't think they do, but just to have that little bit of plastic, it's like also I've got the acetate of Good Grief Christina, which is obviously a treasured item from a fan like myself, so all that is fantastic to have, and a few kind of Thailand EPs, and as I say, I was quite surprised to find different B-sides on a couple of songs. Friend of Mine, for instance, was on the B-side of a Yugoslavian or an Argentinian single, and, lots of bits and pieces like that. So there's always things every month. I think I'm uncovering some new material, but it's always fascinating that even though with 3 hit singles in the UK, there's just so much product about all over the world.
It's amazing, isn't it?
What about your own best memory of being in the band on the good old days in the early 70s, Rick?
I think Top of the Pops was just to be on Top of the Pops was a great memory.
And that was obviously with Excuse Me Baby, but also Son of My Father. You did a couple of Top of the Pops with that, presumably.
I think we did 3 in actual fact, but only one clip remains of it. Unfortunately, they started wiping so much stuff. The BBC, started wiping so much stuff in the early 70s. Now they're kicking themselves, that they've lost it all,
I believe there were 30 songs. There's certainly 30 songs that I've been able to catalogue over the CBS days and up to Root Records. So, the glory days, if you like, up to 1975, 76 time. Are there any unreleased tracks by Chicory Tip that were recorded but never surfaced?
No. I think they was all put out, or what we recorded.
So there's nothing hidden in the closet somewhere?
Not that I know of. That I know of. But that's not to say that the other after I left, whether or not they recorded a couple of bits, I don't know.
If I was to say to you, right, there was 30 big songs that Chicory Tip recorded, give me your top 3 personally. What would they be? Well,
one of my favourites is one I wrote called Memory.
Yeah, absolutely.
Friend of Mine, I like that one. And Excuse Me Baby.
Interestingly, none of the big hits.
That's some of my favourites. Obviously, Son of My Father.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a life-changing song.
I can remember to this day, hearing it for the first time, and I thought it was something different. I don't know whether you was ever aware when the Beatles first come on the scene. You knew it was something different. The Beatles sound, it was something different. And when I heard Son of My Father for the first time, I thought, if that doesn't chart, then we're never going to have a hit,
Well, that's exactly how I felt when I first heard it in 1972 as an 11-year-old. So for me, it's changed my life, that's for sure, as you probably gather by now. But it's interesting you mentioned Friend of Mine, because I think there was also a CBS record. Correct me if I'm wrong, but was it Dr. Marigold's?
Dr. Marigold's Prescription.
Yeah.
They was under Roger's management as well.
Right, and only today, I mean, as I say, going back to how you find out incredible things, I didn't realise that Roger Easterby recorded under the name Easterby and other pseudonyms, and Move On was actually a single.
What, by Roger Easterby?
By Roger Easterby, yeah.
Well, I never knew that.
Well, there you go. You see, we're finding things out all the time. So what about the future then? I mean, the great thing is that you are keeping the name alive by, gigging, going out, and it's fantastic that, 2 of the originals, and up until very recently, of course, 3 of the original band were still performing and getting out there, because, sadly, we've lost some greats from the 70s, Les Gray of Mud and Brian Connolly of Sweet, and many others as well. But the great thing is, of course, Chicory Tip, the 4 originals are still there.
We're still there. And all the time the phone rings, we'll do it.
Fantastic. Well, Rick, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I wish you all the best for the future, of course, and keep the music alive.
We